LinkedIn is pretty amazing at helping you grow your small business. We cannot stop your new clients from emailing you at 3 a.m. We can help you sell, market, and hire in one place. We cannot help you be in 3 places at once. And while we can't help you organize your calendar, LinkedIn can help you land more clients so you have a calendar to organize. Grow your small business on LinkedIn. Learn more at linkedin.com/smallbusiness.
Get business done with the new American Express Graphite Business Cash Unlimited card. With unlimited 2% cash back on all eligible purchases, unlimited 5% cash back on flights and prepaid hotels booked through American Express Travel Online, and a flexible spending capacity that can grow with your business, you'll have the confidence to keep building. Apply today and earn a welcome offer of $1,500 cash back after you spend $50,000 in qualifying purchases on your new card within the first 6 months of card membership. Terms apply. Learn more at go.amex/graphite.
I'm Livy Dunn, All-American gymnast and Viore athlete. When you travel and train as much as I do, you find happiness where you are. On the mat or on the sand, movement and comfort are essential. That's why I live in Performance Joggers by Viore. Made from DreamNet fabric that's made of 89% recycled materials, effortlessly soft and made to move as much as I do. My happiness starts here, in the softest joggers on the planet. Get 20% off your first purchase at Viore.com/Libby. That's VUORI.com/LIVVY. Exclusions apply. Not only will you receive 20% off your first purchase, but enjoy free shipping on U.S. orders over $75 and free returns. Go to Viore.com/Libby and discover the full versatility of Viore clothing. Exclusions apply. Visit the website for full terms and conditions.
Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records. The next time you're in Las Vegas, or if you currently live in Las Vegas or the Las Vegas area, you need to visit the Metal Blade Museum. Now, not only are there artifacts from Metal Blade artists like Metallica, Slayer, Cannibal Corpse, Gwar, Lizzie Borden, there's also artifacts from bands that we had something to do with as well, like Guns N' Roses, Megadeth, Alice in Chains, Deep Purple, Thin Lizzy, Alice Cooper, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really great metal museum. It's located right near the Strip in Las Vegas. Also, our retail store is also now in the museum. So you can go pick up your Metal Blade vinyl, CDs, collectibles, shirts, all sorts of cool stuff. Just go to metalblade.com/museum for all the details. Now, I cannot do a podcast called 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal and not include something from Jimi Hendrix, who, of course, is one of the most legendary guitar players of all time and had such a huge influence on all the godfathers of heavy metal, whether it be Iommi, Page, Blackmore, I mean, you name it. Just such an amazing guitar player. And definitely there's a lot of metal overtones in what he did. And trying to pick the song, there's so many great Hendrix songs, is really kind of difficult. But I thought Along the Watchtower was an interesting one. First of all, it's his most popular one, which, you know, it's kind of a cop-out. I get that. But I think there's some really great guitar playing on it. Love his singing. I love the song, too. It's a great song. And, you know, who knew that a song written by Bob Dylan would end up on a heavy metal podcast? But here we are. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk to my good friend Ryan Williams, who works at Metal Blade Records doing A&R and has been in the studio and in bands and all that stuff. We're going to bring back my friend, Mr. Stoney Curtis, amazing, amazing blues guitar player, and of course, massive Hendrix fan. He can explain a lot better what Hendrix is doing than I can. But as we always do, we start up north with the legend, Mr. Martin Popoff.
Nice one, Brian. So we have Jimi Hendrix Experiences All Along the Watchtower. This first showed up on Bob Dylan's John Wesley Harding album, December 27th, 1967. Jimmy had started working on this pretty early on into 1968. He appreciated Bob Dylan's lyrics, so it eventually shows up on Electric Ladyland, which is the third and final Jimi Hendrix Experience album. We are going to get Band of Gypsies. We're going to get Jimmy dying soon. But yeah, so in the original, there's not a lot of lyrics to this. It's just a very short 12-line song. It's a conversation between a joker and a thief, possibly based on Book of Isaiah, but Jimmy stretches it out to 4 minutes long. You know, how is this important to heavy metal? I mean, this is kind of a hard rock artist proving that he can take a song like this and do something with it and make it a little more urgent, a little more heavy. Is it something to do with power ballads? Possibly, because you also have fairly persistent and relentless electric guitar throughout the thing. I mean, what makes this song kind of more into a rock song? First, we have that kind of dramatic opening sequence. Sounds a little bit like spaghetti western. You've got a vibra slap in there. And then we've got this 1-3 beat that you get going there. So the drums, Mitch Mitchell's drumming here is a little bit kind of chaotic and bashing, and there's fills, there's cymbals. Jimmy actually plays the bass on this one. And we also have Dave Mason on 12-string guitar and Brian Jones on percussion. You can definitely hear the percussion in there. Jimmy kind of turns it into this driving, urgent, sort of hectic, hysteric even in certain respects, given the sort of almost like punk rock percussion to the thing. Otherwise, it's not particularly different from Bob Dylan's version. Like I say, it's longer. Jimmy turns it into a guitar showcase. We've got the wah-wah in there as well. And in the end, he has a pretty big hit with it. It becomes kind of his biggest single. It reaches number 6 in the UK and number 20 in the US. And of course, now, after all this time, after the legend of Jimmy and everything he brought to guitar, and, given Bob Dylan's voice and his pretty spare arrangement and being a folk artist and whatnot, I mean, this has become the ultimate version of this song, recorded as a cover like 1 year after the original, and both of them a long, long time ago. So I'm sure a lot of people listening to this song don't even know it's a Bob Dylan song, although it's such a famous song anyway. So yeah, it's important in our story because he has taken a song and added a lot of electric guitar to it, and it is a super famous Jimi Hendrix Experience song, and it really does have some sort of heavy metal uneasiness or anxiety about it. So yeah, great choice, All Along the Watchtower.
Thanks, Martin. Always good to hear his perspective on things and, of course, the historical part of it. And I had forgotten that the original version of this song by Bob Dylan came out a year before. So he had done a cover of it right within a year, which is definitely not something that normally happens. So really great information. Thanks, Martin. We welcome.
You may think you know McDonald's drinks, but you don't know them like this. From fruity refreshers like the Strawberry Watermelon Refresher and the Mango Pineapple Refresher with popping boba, to crafted sodas like the Sprite Berry Blast with berry-flavored Sprite topped with cold foam. Who knew ice-cold drinks could be so fire? 6 all-new drinks are here. Try them all, now at McDonald's. Refreshers contain caffeine.
This episode is brought to you by Tidy Cats, here to level up your litter game with their new Performance Plus lineup. Your home is your happy place, your cats, VIPs. So when it comes to the litter box, excellence isn't optional. Choose from products that specialize in max power clumping, low tracking, or odor fighting so advanced, stink won't see it coming. Tidy Cats Performance Plus. Mission mighty, keep it tidy. Shop now at tidycats.com.
This spring, Uber Eats has you covered. Whether you're celebrating mom, dad, or your favorite grad, not all of us are great planners, and with the Uber Eats gift hub, you don't have to be. Send flowers, perfume, champagne, or just their favorite meal straight to their door. Gifts arrive in as little as 25 minutes, and you can add a personalized video message for that additional so-not-last-minute touch. So this spring, get a leg up on gift giving with Uber Eats. Last-minute gifts that land every time. Must be 21 or older to purchase alcohol. Product availability varies per region. See app for details.
Back again, a man who was in the Black Dahlia Murder and other bands and has produced and engineered and done many things with them, and also is currently A&R at Metal Blade Records, Mr. Ryan Williams. How are you, sir?
Hey, Brian, doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. I think we're going to talk about a record that was recorded before you were born, if I'm correct.
You are correct. Absolutely. I was born in 80.
Yeah. it's always amazing when you go back to things like this. So this was recorded in 1967 and actually sounds really good.
Totally.
I guess that's the genius of Jimi Hendrix and, of course, Eddie Kramer, who famously engineered it.
This was like kind of a bridge between the really kind of ancient recording technology and then somewhat less ancient recording technology. They recorded this in two parts, is my understanding.
Yes.
And you mentioned Eddie Kramer. And I think at the time of this, he was like 19 or 20.
Yeah.
So, I mean, imagine being a 19-year-old kid and working on one of the biggest records of all time. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing, just that aspect alone. But so they started out in London at Olympic Studios. And at that studio, they only had a 4-track Ampex tape machine, which is kind of like the standard recording gear at that time. So it's very limited. You're working with 4 mono tracks. So there's a lot of like bouncing things down, and you can't do a lot with only 4 tracks. So they started there. Jimmy was notoriously a perfectionist. So they did many takes of this, and it was all the guys recording at the same time. So you got Mitch Mitchell on drums, Noel Redding was on bass. He didn't even make it to the end of the session.
Yeah. He didn't play on this song either, by the way.
Well, I guess that the story is that Jimmy actually finished the bass himself.
He did.
That's what I've found, which I didn't know any of this before. It's really interesting to look into this. And then you've got Dave Mason on the 12 string. And then he played bass for a minute during the sessions too. There was just so many takes. So anyway, they did so many takes that I think the final take was actually number 27. So that just goes to show you how much of a perfectionist he really was. So they did that, and that was a very kind of bare bones version of the song, and that was January 68. They did Eddie and Jimmy's manager, Chas Chandler, did a mix of the song at that time, and Jimmy wasn't really happy with it. So they ended up, he was in between his touring schedule. They ended up taking it to New York, and they were at the record plant then later that year in like June and August. So they took those 4 tracks and they transferred it to a 12-track machine, and then eventually, I think, to a 16-track Ampex. So then they were like, oh my God, we have all these extra tracks we can work with. And Jimmy just went absolutely crazy on overdubs and just having ideas, redoing things, erasing it, doing it again. So he was really like obsessive, and it sounded like they were very creative. And he was really pushing things, especially on the technology side, kind of as far as they would go at that time. And I think the song is so simple that the production really does carry it and really makes it the legendary song it is still today.
Yeah, and the thing that I really liked about it is all of Jimmy's playing, obviously, because he's doing there's a lot of different leads and a lot of different tones. And
yes,
the one thing that I really noticed listening to it again was, and the reason why we're talking about Hendrix is he was the original guitar god, basically.
Yep.
Had a massive influence on the godfathers of metal, Jimmy Page and Tony Iommi and Ritchie Blackmore and, pretty much everybody that was around at that time, especially that saw him in England, including Clapton and Peter Green and all these great guitar players. And as a lot of them seeing Hendrix famously were like, I don't want to play guitar anymore. This guy's so good. What am I doing?
It's from another planet. Yeah.
But when I listened to the leads and why I thought this song was, it's his most famous song, obviously, but it's not necessarily the heaviest one. But the leads in there are really interesting and unique. And the tones that he got, to me, and I don't play guitar and I'm not an expert on any of this stuff necessarily, but some of those tones and some of his playing, there's some Iommi in there, lead-wise at least. You can kind of hear that, and same thing with the other guys too. And that's what really was interesting for me is you've got all the great blues players and they're phenomenal players, but they didn't have that, what kind of became the heavy metal lead tone, more or less.
For sure. And there's a lot of different tones too. There's a little bit darker tones. There's brighter tones. Again, the technology really let them get creative, and I think it really comes through. It's kind of amazing now looking back how much they packed into that song. And it seems simple when you listen to it, and I've been listening to the song for a long time, since I'm like a kid, but listening to it with a production ear now and hearing the way they did things, there's some really unorthodox things too. Like, since the drums were in mono, they have them hard pan to the left, but then there's a delay on the right. So the drums actually sound like they're panned really far left and right, which is something you normally wouldn't do. Normally a snare's right up the middle, the kick drum's right up the middle. But in this case, what it does is it kind of lets the middle have all this empty space. So there's all this room in the middle for the leads and the vocals to really be clear, and you can hear all the effects. They had a lot of cool delays and reverb, and there's things panning left and right, and all that stuff comes through really clearly because the drums are kind of out of the way. And there's also some kind of unorthodox things we normally in metal we wouldn't talk about, a tambourine part or like a vibra slap part, but those are like prominent in this song. So it's really different from a lot of the songs we've talked about.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's he was a different, unique musician all around. The one thing that I do like is, the acoustic guitars make the leads to me sound so much heavier.
True.
And, they're evil kind of, I hate to say that, but kind of that way because it goes against that. I think if it was more of a rhythm guitar that wasn't acoustic, I don't know that they would cut through as much as they did. And look, again, you're talking about, rock and roll in 1967. It was the wild, wild west, especially production wise. Like you mentioned, most everything before this was recorded on small studios. And now all of a sudden he's got all these extra tracks and it's like, hey, it's a playground to do all these extra things. And that's what I love about listening to this is just, I don't know how many different leads and stuff there are, but there's so many of them. And they're so, like, to me, like I said earlier, those leads sound like they could easily be on any Black Sabbath or Judas Priest or Zeppelin album.
Totally. And I think you're really right about the acoustic kind of makes, because there's no real distorted guitar outside of the lead guitar. So the acoustic actually makes those lead parts sound heavier and kind of more dark and evil, like you're saying. So yeah, it's an interesting juxtaposition for sure.
Yeah, and it's a Bob Dylan song, so you're naturally kind of making it heavier. And the other thing too that I really don't think he gets enough credit for is his vocals are amazing on this song. Like he sounds really, really great, and the cadence and the way he's singing it also kind of. You could tell a lot of the metal guys were like, okay, that's an interesting the way he sings and how he sings. And that was a lot different too, which again, he doesn't get, everybody goes on and on about his guitar playing as they should, but he was a really great singer.
That's a really great point. And he was a super perfectionist on the vocals too, which I'm sure you've been in the studio with many vocalists and it's something that a lot of them get into, and they'll be on the 10th take and like, everyone in the room's like, I don't know, the last 8 sounded fine to me. Like, why do you want to keep going? But there's something in it that they're not quite happy with. And that's what really differentiates the goods from the greats is they keep pushing until they're satisfied. And I guess he was really shy in the studio too. He'd kind of be in his own corner, like blocked off. He didn't want people looking at him. And that's another thing that I think a lot of the great vocalists are also kind of, they're shy in a certain way,
Yeah, I know, just being in the studio with a bunch of bands, whether, I'm producing it or working with them or, just hanging out. Like a lot of vocalists don't want anybody in the studio.
It totally
when they're doing the vocals, just the engineer, the producer, and maybe one other person. That's pretty common.
Yeah, you would think these outgoing like front people who are so good at talking to people and engaging, you'd think they'd be like totally fine with it, but it's really common for them to be shy.
Yeah, I don't really know. I'm just trying to think of all the times I've been in the studio where I think I was in with Metallica a lot during the Black album, but rarely when James was singing. Every once in a while, they generally don't want anybody in there anyway, which I get that. I mean, it's their thing. Yeah. Every once in a while somebody would invite me in and they would they allow me to stay for a minute or two, but I'm just going to stay quiet. I'm not going to say anything, of course. But yeah, it's that way. Or, the thing about vocalists too is either, like you said, they'll do 1,000 takes that, all kind of sound the same, or they'll do 1 or 2 takes and go, okay, that's good enough. And then sometimes the producer will go like, nah, I think you can do that better.
Yeah, it sounded like Jimmy was really the driver in this. I mean, other people were involved and obviously had their input, but he was really the maestro in this. And
yeah, he was the producer and
the mixer really in the end and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, but Eddie Kramer, though, I had a huge influence on me. I know just reading articles and even talking to Eddie, I've been lucky enough to talk to him a whole bunch over the years. And he's really, really open about, ask about, what about, tell me about Kiss, tell me about Hendrix, and he'll tell you stories. He's got great stories from all that stuff. But like you said, he was really young, but he was really good. And you could tell, I mean, the guy's had a, unreal career starting with Hendrix. And I think a lot of what Jimmy was doing, a lot of it, certainly Eddie getting those tones and getting those sounds properly on the record, had a lot to do with it. And, you clearly see, where he went on after that with Kiss and, they have a million bands.
Yeah, the other cool thing about Eddie is he's given a lot of great interviews over the years. So you can go on YouTube and watch hours of him talking about mics and the console that they used and just his recollection of things. And a lot of this stuff was from decades ago, but he still has a good memory of how it all went down. So that's really cool.
Oh yeah, like I said, I've been lucky enough to talk to him quite a few times, and he's an open book. It's like ask him anything, and he'll give you all the stories and
so cool.
Everything. It was like amazing. I'm just sitting there like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he was really great. But yeah, it's you listen to a lot of the '60s stuff, and I wasn't really a big fan of a lot of that music. I mean, that's respect to it, but I just didn't like the sound quality of it. It wasn't really until the '70s came in that I thought that the sound was really good. And obviously, we're talking about all instruments. There's no, it has to be the drums are the drums, the bass are the bass, and the guitar is the guitar, and everything. But this one to me had that. I think this album, being the third one that Jimmy did, all three are obviously amazing. But this one to me, sonically, it kind of felt like, oh, this is a bit of a groundbreaking record sonically, because I don't think there's a lot of other stuff that people were recording in the 60s. Maybe some of the Stone stuff, maybe some of the Who stuff, but had this quality where it's like, oh, this actually sounds really good.
Yeah, and there was a lot of kind of groundbreaking effects work at the time too. Like I was saying, those reverbs and those delays and a lot of those tricks, those were brand new at the time, and they were just inventing stuff on the fly, which is pretty cool.
That's why it's interesting, because like I said, it was kind of the Wild Wild West back then. Because basically you're inventing a genre in rock and roll music anyway, and then you can kind of doing actual production in studio where the technology's kind of becoming a little bit better, and the studios actually, you're getting some of the real studios that ended up being around for years and years and years. Yeah, pretty insane. But the Hendrix stuff too, when I listened to it, I was reading a bunch of articles on it as well, and a lot of people described especially this record as being like the party record. There's a whole ton of guests on there, as we mentioned before. So that's why I think Noel Redding kind of got like, it's like a party in here. It's not a recording, it's like a party. So it's kind of crazy. So even though you mentioned that, Jimmy liked to be alone and, a lot of the stuff, but there are other times when there's 15 people in the studio.
I read some of those too, where they had so many people in the studio that it was like a party, and the guys who were trying to play were like, what are all these people doing? And it was a very loose thing, but Jimmy was really friendly with a lot of people, so people would drop by, and it was a hangout as much as, I'm sure you've been involved in those sessions too, where there's just people coming and going, and some people can hang with that, and some people get really annoyed and don't like it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, by this time he was also becoming this legend, and I think people just wanted to be in his presence. And you see all these incredible musicians that wanted to just go and kind of hang out with him, because it's like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. And a lot of it ended up on the record. So
yeah, really cool. There was a story about apparently Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones at the time showed up at the studio and like begged to play piano on the song, but he was just like, they were all partying, and he was like playing nonsense, and they're like, man, you got to go. Sorry, man. So that was the kind of vibe that was going on at certain points in there.
Yeah, I've heard some of the same stuff, man. It would to be a fly on the wall back then, right?
Oh man, it would be amazing.
Thanks as always, my friend. That was great, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Cool. Thanks, Brian.
Hey everyone, Brian Slagel here, founder of Metal Blade Records. I spent my whole entire life trying to make metal history and make metal better and promote metal as much as I can. And now there's a brand new way for you to test your metal knowledge and relive those iconic moments. It's called Metal Mondays, the official metal trivia game from Metal Blade and Pantheon Media, and it's free to play right now. Every Monday, a new game drops. From Slayer, Supremacy to Death, Metal 101, 80s, Metal Blade Classics, and tons more. You'll battle it out on the leaderboards, win killer prizes, and even score some exclusive Metal Blade merch. So if you think you know your riffs, your legends, and your deep cuts, prove it. Download, hit replay on the App Store or Google Play, or head to metalbladerecords.com/Metal Mondays and start playing today. Because in metal, there's no off days. Only Metal Mondays. Metal Mondays. Play loud, play true, and play to win.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You know those friends who support your preference for podcasts over music on road trips? That's the energy State Farm brings to insurance. With over 19,000 local agents, they help you find the coverage that fits your needs, so you can spend less time worrying about insurance and more time enjoying the ride. Download the State Farm app or go online at statefarm.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
All right, if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, which if you are not, you should be, and you should subscribe as well. You can see we are at The Space here in beautiful Las Vegas again. Our good friends here. If you need a podcast room, need to record something, you need a room for your event, you need a room for your concert, many, many things, go to thespacelv.com. They're amazing people here, and they've got anything you need here in Las Vegas. And come to Las Vegas. We're going to welcome back again our old friend, Mr. Stoney Curtis. You know him from his solo career, from Counts Vamped, from Counts Culture, Danny's new podcast.
That's right.
The Counts TV show, and Counts 77. Stoney Curtis, how are you, sir?
I'm excellent. Thank you for having me back once again.
So you can't do, or at least I can't do, a podcast called 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal without talking about Jimi Hendrix, of course.
Right.
And I figured who better to talk to about Jimi Hendrix than one of the best guitar players I know, you, my friend. So it's really interesting. So I went back and forth, kind of talked about it earlier in the podcast, but I went back and forth of like, okay, we have to talk Hendrix because very influential. I'll mention why in a second, which I'll probably be redundant here from what I've said earlier, but Ritchie Blackmore, Tony Iommi, and Jimmy Page. All, you can argue that those are the top three heavy metal bands to start the whole thing, right? Yep. Especially Sabbath. All of them lived in London. Hendrix arrived in London, when all those bands were forming. In some cases, Page was in a different band, and, Iommi and them, I don't even think Black Sabbath was a thing yet. They all went to see Jimi Hendrix, and all of them universally were like blown away. I mean, everybody that went to see him back then was freaked out. Like whether it's Peter Green or Eric Clapton or these guys, like he played there, and they're all like, what is this?"
Right.
Because,
can't compete.
Yeah, because he was so incredible. And again, in picking the songs, I wanted to do this one. First of all, just fun to say, we're talking about a Bob Dylan song on a heavy metal podcast, but it's a great song. And there's two reasons why I picked it. Number one is the guitar tones that Hendrix has in here. And if you listen to it, especially the way Iommi's lead sounded, like this was very, very similar, eerily similar to some of the early Iommi leads, just in the tone and the quality and how he's playing. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about his very underrated vocals, which I think on this song were absolutely phenomenal. So let's start from the beginning with, as a guitar player, where do you rank Hendrix in terms of just the influence of what he was?
Oh, he's number one. He's number one. I always look at myself as a third generation disciple of Hendrix, right? The first generation of the Robin Trowers, the Frank Marino, Stevie Ray, stuff like that. And then I think guys like me that kind of came after that too, where everything is kind of based around that blues rock style of Hendrix, where it's just the energy and the heat behind it of the blues. So Hendrix, for influence, I think he's number one for everybody, for most.
Yeah, pretty much. And the thing that was interesting for me, and again, I don't play guitar, so or any instruments for that matter, but even though everything he was doing was certainly very blues-based, obviously, but the way he played was so different, and really, like I mentioned earlier, that was kind of the beginning of the way heavy metal leads and heavy metal guitar playing going. And you can talk to all those guys about how much of an influence he was on all of them. And especially this song, to me, when I listened to Along The Watchtower, it's a great song, by the way. It's his most popular song, which is interesting. But I just listened to the lead in here. It's not like a heavy rhythm. There's, acoustic guitars and whatnot in there. But these leads are just so incredible. And what he's playing and the tone, the way he's playing it, is like, that doesn't sound like the blues to me. That sounds like what became heavy metal leads happening after that. And even to this day, when I listen to it, I go, those are metal leads. I mean, they're heavy metal leads. And, you know, I mean, obviously a lot of his other songs were certainly very heavy in the rhythms and stuff, but those leads didn't sound like anybody else at the time. And that's really, to me, begat the lead guitar playing part of the metal bands.
I would agree with that. And he's also starting to experiment a lot with soundscapes, coloring. Like you said, there's 12-string acoustic, there's 6-string acoustic. There's a lot of that back masking kind of reverb going on, right? That's starting to kind of creep in there.
It wasn't easy to do back then, by the way.
No, right, yeah, no. Right now you just go push a button and it's done. But back then, you know, and Eddie Kramer too, I think that the two of them had some kind of chemistry together where they were really just experimenting and stuff and really taking the guitar and the music just into another stratosphere, really. Yeah, you had wah-wah pedal in there, you had the guitar, you know, stuff's going backwards, forwards, he's ascending, he's descending. There's all sorts of madness going on in this song when you really just sit there and just...
That I don't think anybody really heard at that point either.
Right. Yeah, there was nothing like it. You know, maybe the Beatles were starting to kind of in that kind of vibe
a little bit, sure.
Yeah. At that point there, you know, he's really starting to experiment a lot and reading a lot about this too. He's starting to get frustrated with trying to find sounds where I think he spent months on this song trying to get All Along the Watchtower down, where I think the bass player walked out. They were tired of it. They were tracking over and over and over again. I think he was driving himself mad, but I think he was driving the band mad as well.
Yeah. Perfectionist, you know, I get it. It was unusual for the time for people to spend that much time in a studio for a variety of reasons. And we know these Black Sabbath records are recorded like in a day. But I get it what he was trying to do, and also just so revolutionary. And the stuff was, I mean, he was doing things that nobody else had done before. So when you're kind of stepping out into the unknown, basically, it makes sense that it would take a while. Well, I can see him going like, oh, I have this in my head. How do I get it on the tape and play it the right way where it sounds right? You know,
it always seemed like Jimmy, he didn't play to the people. He just played like to the universe in a way, right? You know what I mean? It's just like he just had this magic about him. I would imagine, especially back then too, trying to get those sounds onto tape had to be challenging. Yeah. Because like I said, now we just hit a pedal or hit a button and we got that sound-ish.
Yeah, and it's also just, again, you know, just so different and so unique what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, that I want to talk a little bit about that I don't think he gets nearly enough credit is his vocals, especially on this song. I think on this song, look, I love all the guitar parts and everything, but to me, I love the vocals on this song. I love the way he sings the song. I mean, it's a great song. Dylan's obviously a brilliant songwriter, but he kind of made it his own. I just love the way he sounds. I was listening to it the other day going like as a singer, he was actually really good.
I thought he was great, yeah. And I say the same thing about Stevie Ray, too, where the guitar playing is so extraordinary that the vocals tend to get overlooked, but they both just have just a unique voice, and it just has so much style and vibe behind it that, again, it's hard to match that, too.
Yeah, I just think about, you know, a lot of 70s bands that came after this that you kind of go, oh, you know what, those vocals kind of eerily sound like Hendrix. Certainly, you know, Thin Lizzy had he had a huge influence on Phil, and you know, Phil had such an amazing voice too, and like so many other, even like you listen to like some Paul Rodgers going on in here, and some other of these, you know, Phil Mogg, you know, so many of these 70s singers that came from England that when you listen to the way they sing and you listen to this song specifically and some of the other Hendrix stuff too, I go, they're kind of doing some stuff that Jimmy was doing vocally, which I never really thought about that much until I kind of delve into this whole thing. I go, you know, he was actually a really, really good singer. You could see how these other guys might have used some of that. I mean, pretty much everybody in London at that time went to go see him. So, and they all heard the records, so they knew what was going on. So I find that really fascinating that, like, well, in addition to being this, you know, unbelievable guitar player, his vocals were really, really good. I've never seen him, just like you mentioned, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, never got credit.
And he was very insecure about it to where he did, you know, he didn't like recording in front of people. He liked to hide behind some screen or something. But I love Jimmy's voice, and the way he delivers a song is unmatched because he's got, it's like this American blues vibe, but this British kind of way of attacking it, right? So, and I still don't think anybody has ever sounded like Jimi.
No, it's so unique. Of course, we have such a short amount of stuff that we got from him, so you never know what would have happened. And then the third thing where he also had a massive influence is the stage show.
Yeah.
We lighting stuff on fire and you're doing all this crazy stuff. Like, again, nobody was doing that back then. There was, very little show. You could, talk about a very few people that were doing stuff like that back then. But Hendrix was one of the first to, do crazy stuff on stage. Like, lighting guitar on fire. I mean, that's everything. How heavy metal is that?
Yeah. I mean, well, the playing with the teeth, the playing behind your, playing behind your head, behind your back. I mean, he just did it all. I mean, it was, he's a big influence on me in that way too, performance-wise as well. Just the way he crouched down and just the way he attacked the guitar, and just it was a part of his being, and that's why I've always loved the Stratocasters because of Jimi. But there's just so much that you can express with a Stratocaster that has so many different sounds, and having the tremolo bar, etc. It really just takes it to another level that I don't think you really get with guys that were playing Les Pauls back then too, or that kind of stuff, right? Where Clapton had his thing, but Jimi just, with all of this stuff that you could use on this guitar, used every part of it, like no other.
I do know that, again, you talk about the different, I mean, I prefer, just from the sound point of things, I prefer a Les Paul much more than I do a Fender. But, it just depends. But I know for leads, for whatever reason, I've talked to guitar players all the time. I go, it seems like a lot of guys have the leads for the Fenders. But then again, a guy like, Richie Blackmore that wrote a lot of really heavy riffs too was doing it on Fenders. So you never know. And he was clearly, influenced a lot by Hendrix also.
For sure.
And very much so, if you watch him in the early days, like even just his mannerisms on stage were, oh, yeah, that's kind of similar.
Yeah, because I think Jimi had a big influence in that way as well. Like you said, the performance, like Richie too, slamming the guitar into the speakers and, rubbing it on the speaker. I mean, that's all Jimi. Yeah, I think Jimi kind of started all that. Maybe Pete Townsend had some of that too, but
there were other people that were doing stuff back then too, theatrically even. But Hendrix was one of the first ones to really kind of blow people away. And I know in reading, I've read pretty much everybody's autobiography, rock-wise, and it was everybody talking about that started in London. All those bands, whether it's Fleetwood Mac or Black Sabbath or Zeppelin or Purple, all those bands, they were all, when they saw Hendrix, were like, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah. Can you imagine seeing that in some little club?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what blows you.
At the Marquee in London, right?
Right. It's just this little place, and to have that going on, right, it just must have just blew their minds out like no other.
Well, a lot of them were saying, the famous quotes is like, we give up.
Right.
I'm going to throw the guitar away.
Done. What am I going to do? You can't. This is it. I mean.
Yeah, so incredible. But that's why, it's just such an important part, because, look, you can't say like he did this and this and this and that became what became in metal. But we mentioned all those things that he did, and he was one of the first to do all of those things. And clearly all those guys were massively influenced by him. And then, that's what I've always tried to stress on this podcast is that, what we're talking about here, and a lot of it is the basis of where this genre started.
Right.
And you could go all the way clear back to Hendrix, really almost one of the flashpoints of kind of where the whole scene started. Certainly the blues was the basis of that, and that's all those bands were based on the blues. But Hendrix was doing it a different way, especially guitar playing, that I think got a lot of those guys thinking like, oh, okay, well, that's different. How can we incorporate that in what we're doing with the heavier stuff that we're dealing with now?
Yeah, and it was also kind of, you're bringing in the fuzz pedal. Yep. And bringing in that kind of distortion sound. Fuzz is a little bit different in distortion, but the octave pedal, the wah pedal, of course, the univibe, all of that sound. Yeah, he's kind of one of the first ones that really kind of took it to that level. When you think about it with heavy music, yeah, I mean, it's kind of starting right there with the fuzz and stuff. So
there are other bands like Blue Cheer, for example, that kind of get credited as being the first band, and the Who as well, being some of the first bands that used the early distortion and the Marshall amps and those sort of things. But Hendrix was the one that kind of perfected a lot of that, and his own unique sound too. It wasn't like he was doing anything else, and that's the thing that always was really blew me away. It was just like, this guy was like a unicorn back then, like just completely different from whatever anybody else was doing. And even to this day, when people talk about him and his his influence, what he did. Like, he's just kind of like every form of rock music who are guitar players, people go back to him. You know,
Sure.
whether it's pop or rock or hard rock or heavy metal, whatever it is.
Yep.
And that's pretty amazing for a guy to have that much of an influence over, you know, whether it's Prince to Tony Iommi
Right.
to Terry Kath from Chicago. You know, you can go
Yeah.
on and on to all these different bands and different genres of rock music that all kind of point back to like that's the guy that kind of started the whole thing.
I agree 100%. It's unmatched. I mean, I don't, just trying to like scroll through my brain.
I know, there's like not enough words, right?
Whoever really sounded like Jimmy. I mean, you know, there were guys like, you know, like Robin Trower and stuff like that, oh, he's a Hendrix. But still, I mean, Robin had his own kind of sound, but nothing ever really matched Jimmy.
And even the blues guys that, you know, came before him, that kind of really were the ones that started the whole thing. You know, those guys, even when you listen to the way they play, you can see a little bit of what's there for sure, but Hendrix just took it to some other level. You're like, what on earth?
Yeah, and then it's kind of started to make its way. Jimmy's playing, like with the Isley Brothers, with Ernie Isley and stuff like that too, was also a big Hendrix guy. You know, bringing it into the R&B thing, bringing it into funk, you know, like you said, Prince and some of that. I mean, it's all Hendrix stuff to me, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, Funkadelic, Ohio Players, all that stuff that was all coming from the whole Hendrix vibe too. Yeah, it's fascinating that all of that. I would have loved to have seen if he would have stuck around a little bit more. Pure conjecture, pure speculation, but I think he might have, once that metal scene kind of really started to hook up with, you know, with the Zeppelins and the Sabbaths and the Deep Purples. I have a feeling he might have gone in that direction, not completely during his career, but he might have made kind of a heavier record. That would have been fascinating to listen to what that would be like.
One of my desert island albums is the Band of Gypsies.
Yeah, well,
you know, and so you know you're starting to see almost, it's kind of progressing into that. It's getting heavier. The guitar player is getting even wilder.
Yep.
And the sounds and stuff. So I think he would have probably got more into, you know, the heavy music, but then also too, especially with Electric Ladyland, that whole album, there's so much experimentation and stuff going on that who knows where it could have went. You know, he's really starting to really expand his horizons of how he was playing the guitar, but also the singing, and like you said, the singing and just the overall presentation of the music was really starting to really expand. Yeah,
you know, you talk to a lot of people about people who passed away early, and there's, you know, some people say like, you know, some of them probably, they passed away and we liked them so much because they passed away early. We never got to see them be terrible or because, you know, you never know where, you know, I mean, some of these people were kind of headed, like Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin were kind of headed down a road where who knows where they would have gone or you know, anything musically. But with Jimmy, I felt that he was just scratching the surface. Mm-hmm. It was going to be like, no, we would have had even more incredible stuff they did. Like I said, I speculate, like if he was around in 73, 74, I mean, he might have thrown a couple of super heavy songs on a record. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, like I said, that stuff is already kind of naturally heavy. You know, we were talking about Voodoo Child and stuff. That's, I mean, to this day, you know, that's just one of them bangers where, I mean, any band can just light that up.
Yeah, that's why it's always difficult to like pick songs. And I just picked this song just so we could talk about this a bit, because I do think that a lot of the lead playing is really kind of revolutionary for where it came. But there's so many other stuff. You look at the Hendrix catalogs, like, I mean, we talk about 50 songs. And they're all different and all certainly had a big influence on what became here. Yeah. It was just interesting because, you know, he passed away in 1970. I'm like, man, just right after that was where all this stuff happened. Like I said, it would have been
because that was almost like the alley-oop for the 70s, right? Because the 70s were then just, that's all the music that we love. I mean, that's the beginning of it. That's when Sabbath came.
Sabbath and Purple and Alice Cooper and everything, like on a 71, 72. Yeah. I was like, man, it would have been interesting to see what all of that would have got for Hendrix and where he would have gone. It would have been pretty interesting, but you know, all I can do is speculate on that.
Well, you know, too, the great thing about Jimmy, too, and another thing that overlooked is his lyrics. I mean, yes, this is a Bob Dylan song, but so many of these other Hendrix songs, he wrote the lyrics, and they're beautiful.
I mean, honestly, when I was a kid listening to Hendrix stuff, I had no idea this was a Bob Dylan song. It just sounded like a Hendrix song. Right. And even lyrically, I just felt, that sounds like something he would write, you know? But then, it's a Bob Dylan song. Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of like...
I had no clue when I was, 11 or 12 or 13 years old or whatever.
Yeah. And truth be told, too, when I was younger, I didn't necessarily get Hendrix yet. because I think, your brain is kind of developing and what's going on,
Sure.
So then as I kind of got older and started to play guitar more, I started going, okay, it's all starting to kind of make sense of what he's doing and why this sounds the way it sounds, right? The other thing that's beautiful about this song too is the Dylan lyrics with Jimmy's guitar. So, I mean, it's like you have kind of the voice of the time, maybe with Dylan, right? Yep. With obviously the musician of the time, and just kind of bringing that together, and just the way he brought that song to life and made it a Jimi Hendrix song. That's special.
Yeah, and I'm like you. Like, I grew up in the 70s, so I kind of didn't like the 60s stuff to me. Like, respect to Beatles and all that sort of stuff. And I like the Stones at the 70s much more than I like the Stones at the 60s.
Sure.
And so Hendrix being part of the 60s, but it still had that. I mean, that's the earliest stuff when I was going back. I've talked about this a lot in this podcast, but being in this world, I've tried to go back and do my research about where it started and what happened, and listening to some of these bands that came out in the 60s, way before the early 70s stuff, and certainly Hendrix being one of the major ones. But as I've gotten older and just kind of gone back, I appreciate what he did a lot more now, for whatever reasons, maybe just because man, you listen to the stuff now, and it's 50 some odd years later, and it still sounds amazing.
60 in some of it,
yeah. 60 in some of it, yeah. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it still sounds as fresh, and we're still chasing it.
Yeah,
musicians, we're still chasing that vibe of Hendrix. It's just,
and that's always the thing for me is that if I listen to something that came, no matter when it came out, however long ago it was, whether it's the 80s, the 70s, even the 60s, like if I can listen to it in the last, let's say 5 years, and it still sounds fresh and new to me, then that to me is like legit. I can't be the only one that's thinking that, right? I think a lot of people think the same thing, because you go back a lot of times and some things, I mean, a lot of things do stand the test of time for me, but a lot of them don't. Well, I'll go back and like, man, I really loved that band back then. And now, yeah, I mean, it's good, but it sounds dated. And well, certainly the production of Hendrix is somewhat dated, but still the sounds on there aren't.
Yeah, because I think that they're raw.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much just a microphone in front of a cabinet, and you're in a studio and you're playing for real. Now, everything's kind of on a grid and everything's locked in, and sometimes it doesn't have a sway to it because it's so locked into stuff. But back then, it was just guys in a studio jamming.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why, again, I've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast, but that's why I love listening to 70s.
Yeah.
Because it's all real instruments. Like this is before there were all these plugins and all this other stuff. And even early 80s to some degree too. That's the way the instrument sounded. There wasn't much you could do to help them.
Yeah,
and it was reverb, a little this and that, but that's about it.
Yeah, a little delay, a little reverb. And like you said too, every sound on these recordings was made by a human being.
Yes.
Whether it be the tambourine that, in this song too, there's so much percussion and stuff going on there too. There's a vibro slap that I, kind of researching this song a little bit. Brian Jones played that.
Oh, wow.
And then we had Dave Mason, who just passed away. He played 12 string on this. So there was Jimmy ended up playing bass on it because Noel had enough, I think. And there was just all sorts of going on. So what a remarkable song.
Yeah. And I always like to listen to or have a lot of respect for it, whether, not just music, but even athletes that, started like, Gordie Howe, the first really famous big hockey player, and how he influenced, Gretzky and everybody after that. And that's what's made the game so great. And you say that in, every sport, with football, baseball, whatever it is. And the same thing in music. And when you go back and you just look at somebody like this, you're just like, wow, that guy, like what he did back there and influenced so many different people and really kind of changed music at the time, which you can't say about a lot of people.
Before Jimmy, who was there that kind of did that? I mean, he really was the innovator in a sense. I mean, you had other great guitar players and a lot of, Jimmy was obviously.
A lot of the blues guys, like, Buddy Guy.
A
bunch of these guys were incredible players.
Yeah.
And they were creating something completely unique and different too.
Yeah.
But I think when we look in terms of the metal world, like Hendrix was the first, like, oh, you could do that with a guitar.
Yeah, that's why I loved it too, is that he had a way of wringing out sounds out of this guitar that we're all still kind of searching for today. We're still trying to figure a lot of it out.
Well, like I said, I went back and listened to this song a couple times in headphones. And I realized that there are some leads and guitar tones on here of the leads that completely sound like Tony Iommi to me.
Yeah.
Completely. I was like, oh, that's something from Iron Man, or just on,
Right.
the lead track of how it sounds. Like, oh wow, which is interesting because we know Tony played the SG for the most part. I think he played something else early on, but the SG for the most part is what he played. And of course, Hendrix, as you mentioned, is playing a Telecaster.
Yeah,
and
that's
there's
Strat. Yeah,
Strat. Sorry, two very different guitars to
Right.
be able to get that same similar tone, which is interesting.
I just kind of started to get into SGs a little bit because SG is kind of like, it's not a Les Paul and it's not a Strat because it's thinner and it's got a little bit more of a bite to it.
Well, it's got the crunch. Like for me, the SGs and the Flying Vs, they like the crunch of the rhythm guitars.
Right.
For example, like listen to the first couple of Trouble records, which sort of doom metal. I mean, they're playing tuned down Flying Vs, and that's like still probably the heaviest like rhythm guitar tone ever. And of course, with Iommi, I mean, that's Sabbath is the heaviest, and that's where the SGs come from. And then you graduate that to Purple and even Rainbow with Blackmore doing stuff on his Fenders, and it's still really heavy, but it doesn't have quite the crunch that the other stuff does. But
and the SG too. They when you start playing leads on them, they got a bite to them that's a little bit different than the Les Paul. So
well, that's the thing about the SG. I've talked to guitar players about this a lot. Is that because Iommi has those two fake fingers, he's able to get, because apparently it's pretty hard to play the frets and the strings on an SG, a little harder to play like for really cool leads. But when you've got two things on your fingers, you don't feel anything.
Right.
It's like he kind of, and that also kind of added to his sound. It's also interesting how guitar players create a different sound. So with Iommi, he's got the two fake fingers, right? So that's clearly, his sound's a lot coming from that because he can play it differently because he doesn't have the feeling. He doesn't have to hard up his fingers like everybody else does. And then you look at somebody like Brian May in Queen, who was playing instead of with a pick, he's playing with a
coin,
a coin, and got a whole different guitar tone. There's like it's kind of fascinating how these people kind of bring, just for whatever reason, the guitar tones are different because of what they're doing, and then that revolutionizes what so many people do.
Sure, and they develop their own sound that way too.
Yep.
Because the same thing. When Tony Iommi plays, you pretty much know it's Tony Iommi.
Yeah.
And same thing with Jimmy and some of these other guys too. That it all has a with Tony, I think too. They kind of tune down a little bit to help with that. So that kind of helps give you that. I learned some of that too from talking to Jakey Lee about it, where he, especially recently, he's kind of tuned down because he's had little wrist problems and stuff, right? So he's kind of tuning down, but it kind of gives a different kind of more elastic on the string. So the way the vibrato's happening and the way he's pushing and pulling on it creates a sound.
Yeah, Jake, I mean, we just did this a while ago with my buddy Adam Rank, who, if you know him from the Jim Rome Show and NFL Network, we talked about Bark at the Moon, which is my favorite Ozzy Osbourne song.
Yeah.
And that lead at the end of that song is, to me, one of the best leads ever.
It's incredible.
I listen to that, I go, how on earth is he playing this?
Yeah.
It's so mind-blowing.
One of the reasons why I love Jake so much too, and I love Randy Rhoads, don't get me wrong, but I am a huge Jakey Lee fan back then, especially too, is that he's kind of more 70s.
Yep.
You know what I mean? The way he attacked it, he didn't really have the bar and all that, and he wasn't doing all this stuff. He was playing, stretching, and in that kind of Hendrix influence, wringing those sounds out of the guitar. He's yanking on it. He's pulling the neck. He's doing all that kind of stuff. So more of a 70s thing, but definitely starts with the Hendrix right there too.
Yeah, 100%. Just real quick on that. So, I mean, I saw Randy Rhoads and Quiet Riot when they were coming up. They were like a pop metal band, but Randy was incredible.
Right.
Like unbelievable. Like, why is this guy in this band? He's way too good to be in this band. And when Jake was in the early versions of Rat, like they were heavy. They were like Judas Priest heavy. Yeah. And Jake was doing a lot of kind of Glenn Tipton, KK Downing leads. So I think that's where kind of that melds into what Ozzy was doing too with the two separate players. But like, look, Randy Rhoads is a legend. So
sure, and too, and where we go Judas Priest too. It kind of started out more bluesy till it got heavier.
Oh yeah,
right. Up until what Killing Machine is like maybe when it really started to kind of.
I think Sin After Sin was probably the first two were heavy, but definitely very bluesy. And then Sin After Sin came out. I was like, oh my god, like Sinner and all this. Like, whoa, what is going on?
Yeah.
I was definitely kind of the beginning of like, oh, they're getting a lot heavier and doing different things. So,
yeah,
for sure. Well, dude, I can't thank you enough for doing this.
Thank
as always.
you. This is always a pleasure, man.
Appreciate you. And I know you got a record coming out pretty soon.
I do. Yeah, we started mixing it. So I got one song done. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. We have one song in the can for the most part. Still got some to go, but everything's recorded, everything's ready, and now it's just I brought in a guy, Tom Fletcher, to mix it, and he's
nice. Approximate release date?
Mike wants it out in 2 months, so let's hope by the summertime.
By
sometime.
June, July. Okay, and it's on Shrapnel Records. Our good friend Mike Varney, who we just had on the podcast a couple weeks ago to talk about UFO. So awesome, man. Well, thanks again.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, that'll wrap it up. Thanks to all the guests. Stoney Curtis, check him out. Amazing, amazing blues and rock guitar player. Mr. Ryan Williams, and of course, Mr. Martin Popoff. And as always, Lizzie Borden does our theme song, and the producer that makes it all happen, Mr. Christian Blatt. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next episode.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Stitch Fix. Stop shopping, get styled. A+ on the outfit, Miss Turner. You are about to slay parent-teacher conferences.
Oh, these? Just the most perfect fitting jeans my stylist sent me.
Oh, hello, you, who didn't set one foot in a mall and still looks amazing.
Just share your size, style, and budget, and your stylist sends personalized looks right to your door. Stitch Fix. Get started today at stitchfix.com. To my stylist, this look is dedicated to you. Thank you. Thank you.